Hi, it's Martin from Martin's Engine Services. On the bench in front of me is what's left of a steering rack from a 2006 Fiesta. I swapped this out yesterday on a friend of mine's car, and because he has quite a large leak coming from the near side of the rack. It was actually pouring out around the gaiter, and well, we thought it was basically fluid coming out, but it was actually a combination of fluid and rusty water. And it seemed to appear in the past that this rack had had a couple of new gaiters fitted, and they were those horrible sort of universal aftermarket things, and one of them just simply hadn't sealed properly, and hence the water got in and just sat in there and destroyed the rack. You can see the level of corrosion on the end of the shaft here, and the dark area, how bad it is. And in fact, you can see here when I scrape my thumb across it how pitted it is. There's also quite a spectacular score in it. I can get it in the right angle. Quite a nasty score actually in the surface of the rod, and that was actually caused by a significant build-up of rust inside the locking collar here. Let's shine a bit of light inside. There's actually a chunk of rust right there at the tip of the light, which has actually grown inside the collar and actually swollen up to the point where it's actually grabbing on the shaft and literally tearing the surface up. So obviously the seal here was not doing its job anymore. Interesting factor also, well, not an interesting fact, but an interesting thing actually happened is there's a hole drilled here, and the centre of the shaft is actually hollow all the way through to here, and there's the corresponding hole. And this allows the air to move freely between the two gaiters when you turn lock to lock. Of course, the fluid had been leaking into this side, had gone up the shaft, and it had been pouring out through this hole, and had put all the fluid into the pinion area, which is normally full of grease, and of course filled the other gaiter up. This has made quite a mess because the water and everything had got in there as well. And here is the pinion with the really disgusting coloured grease on it, and it smells delightful. You can see the sort of aftermath of what the fluid should be like. This unit actually has an electric power steering system fitted, so that it's actually a sort of a greeny coloured sort of mineral oil in there, as opposed to normal ATF type fluid, which has gone, well, shall we say, a bit brown and chunky. There was no leak from the top of the pinion seal here. That was actually fine. But and it still actually worked quite well. Still had plenty of power steering assistance. But he did say it was actually turning better one way than the other, which is hardly surprising because in the state of it. So it just shows what happens when you have poor quality gaiters. They just don't fit and don't seal properly. And the net result is it's probably taken out a perfectly good serviceable component. We did have quite a laugh installing actually, because we fitted the other one into the vehicle no problem, and we fitted new tyre rod ends and track rod ends, and set both track rod ends at equal distance, and set the pinion in the middle, and put it all in the car. However, once you put the car on the ground, the steering wheel was actually about a quarter of a turn out. This threw us for some time, and there simply wasn't enough adjustment on the track rod ends to correct this. We adjusted the subframe position to make sure that was perfectly lined up, as is very critical with these Fords, and that work was fine. And we did a lot of head scratching, and we compared this rack lock to lock. We did the turns lock to lock, see where the pinion started, same as the one we'd installed. And in fact, I have a spare rack from my Fiesta, and we compared the two. So we had two spare racks to compare, and every time we tried it, we got the same result. We then started thinking, is something on the car out? So we checked the wishbones and we checked the ball joint positions, did lots of measuring and whatnot, and it turned into a real head scratcher. In the end, a bit of a eureka moment was we realised that the previous person had taken out the subframe in the past. We know it had been out of the vehicle because where they'd put the subframe up through the car, this shaft had hit the floor and there was a slight mark in the floor. They put the subframe back, but they obviously hadn't put it back in the correct position, and consequently it was skewed off to one side. So obviously they must have had a serious problem in getting the alignment right on the steering. So what they'd done is took the steering off and moved it round one on the hexagon. So that was all the problem was. But of course we really are scratching our head because everything was perfectly lined up and everything was pointing perfectly straight before we took it to pieces. So it was one of those ones. So we corrected that, and Now everything's pointing in the right direction. So by somebody having done something sort of wrong in the past, throws you out completely because it's not apparent what they've actually done. And so it was one of those ones. So we did have a few hours of head scratching and measuring, and went off on a tangent, calculations, thinking about it, and we treble checked the pinion position was in the middle. We calculated it lock to lock and whatnot, and it turns out we were chasing someone else's doings. So it just goes to show you, it's one of those things that just will catch you now and again. So that's the inner workings of a 4-power steering rack, nothing majorly complicated about it. You've got the pressure seal here on the ram. You've got the other pressure seal is up inside here, which is fixed in the casing, and the fluid just comes in and basically moves the piston backwards and forwards to the power assistance. You've got your 2 pipes going in, your feeds pipes. Obviously fluid goes in one side, that goes that way, and fluid comes out of there, and vice versa. And on the pinion here, you've got the control spool with the various holes drilled in it, which allows the fluid in and out depending on the position, and it's basically just a control valve. There's not that much to it really, but perfectly good unit ruined by a simple case of a few cheap gaiters. But there you go, that's my little video for the day. I thought I'd take it to bits. I've been working on the Transit again most of the day. I've got the other side rail fitted. A few other little bits of welding done, and I've just been cleaning up and trimming the plate to fit. And cleaning the back of this plate up is a mind-boggling job, which I shall resume tomorrow. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed this little video on the inner workings of the steering rack and a quick update on what I'm doing. And please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.